Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Nerd Soup. My name is Reuben, and on today's episode we will be reviewing Invincible Season 3 Episodes 1 through 3. Now my sources are telling me that we did not finish our review of Invincible Season 2, the second half. For some reason I really thought that we did. In my own mind I had convinced myself that we did the first 4, then we came back for the second half. But yeah, no, apparently we never did. So, good season, I thought, Season 2. Mark's got a brother, reunites with Omni-Man, kills Angstrom, multiverse stuff. Him and Amber break up after she was threatened by the sexy Viltrumite lady. And here we are, Season 3. But before we get into this review, I want to let you guys know that you can listen to this. Well, actually, you know what? You might not be able to listen to this because it might be too short for us to upload to podcasting platforms. It might not make sense, but you can listen to our other reviews across all podcasting platforms, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, etc. And you can follow us on social medias at NerdSoup, at Beau Soup, and I'll give Aaron a shout out at NerdSoupMonkey, and he'll be back for our review of episode 4 when we do that next week. But for now, it's just me talking about Invincible, so bear with me. Yeah, and Invincible is a show that whenever it comes around, I'm like, oh, wow, Invincible is one of my favorite shows of all time. Just needed a little refresher, a little recap of what I watched in the last season. And yeah, Season 3 continues that story where we left off with Mark and his new brother Oliver, and Debbie taking on the role as a mom once again, really honing in on this idea of rehabilitation. Can you do something awful and make up for that with good deeds? And I think what they're trying to do is prepare us for the eventual redemption of Omni-Man.
I think I miss my wife.
I think that's way down the line, but you're seeing it just in the sporadic scenes that we have with Omni-Man in these first 3 episodes with Alan, and also what happens between Mark and Omni-Man at the end of Season 2. So that's definitely coming, but they're warming us up by pitting Cecil and Mark against each other, and I think that was a brilliant move because they're 2 characters who are on the same side. They're both fighting towards the same aim. When the Viltrumites come, they're going to need each other. But there are some stark differences between them on how they want to operate. Mark does agree to work with Cecil in Season 2 to finally follow his lead, to formally join the Guardians, and by the end of episode 1 of Season 3, that all goes to shit. And it's because of Cecil's efforts to not only work with Sinclair with his reanimant, but also to rehabilitate Darkwing, taking 2 characters who did despicable deeds, who have blood on their hands, and giving them an opportunity at redemption to do something good. And I love how they always have these training montages that, oh, Mark's this much stronger, he's this much faster, he's done all of this work. And it's still not enough. He's defeated by Dr. Seismic. Him and Adam Eve are defeated by Dr. Seismic. And it's the creepy-ass reanimant that have to save the day. And Mark doesn't hesitate when he sees them. Because of what they did to his friends, he instantly goes for the kill. But before we get into the divide between Mark and Cecil, I do want to comment on some of the issues that people have had with Invincible over the years. I think the main issue has been obvious, their release schedule. They shot themselves in the foot after all the hype they built at the end of Season 1 with their release, with the delayed release of Season 2, and then the scattered release of the second half of the season. It really killed their hype for a lot of people. I think most fans did come back and they enjoyed it, but it really hurt their opportunity to bring in even more fans. That's the biggest detriment that the scattered release had on the show overall. And the other criticism people have is focused on the animation, or the lack of quality animation. To me, it was never really a problem. It's something that didn't really stand out to me as a bad thing, but it's definitely something I'm more aware of. And I think this scene, when it's time for Mark and Adam Eve to team up to fight Dr. Seismic, I was hype. I was ready to see them fight together. Love both of those characters. They've got cool powers, and I thought it was a chance for them to just wreck some cannon fodder. And then when the fight starts, you begin by watching it from the perspective of Cecil and Donald. We're behind our television screens, and then we're behind their monitors as well. So you're not even up close and personal with the fight. And I kept thinking to myself, if this was an anime, anime always does with dramatic moments, there'll be still shots where the characters aren't moving. they'll have an expression on their face. They save the budget for those bigger moments when there's going to be a fight, when there's going to be a lot of movement. They want to make it fluid. They want to make it pop. So those moments are supposed to be epic. And I think far too many times in Invincible, they're not. And that is a legit criticism that people have of this show. And I kept thinking to myself, if this was an anime, in an alternate reality where one of these famous anime studios brought this fight to life, the music would have changed, it would have swelled up, and the animation would have just gotten a touch nicer, and there would have been a blue hue and a pink hue surrounding Mark and Adam Eve. They would have had a split screen where they zoom in on the eyes, and the fights would have been incredible. And here, they're just not. And people will argue, well, the point is that, for all the work that Mark did to become stronger, he's still being foiled by someone as dopey as Dr. Seismic. That's fun. But they are still fighting. They are still wrecking shop a bit. It's not like they're not doing it. They don't succeed in the end, but for a time, it looks like maybe they will. So I think that is becoming more and more of, for some people, it's been a legitimate criticism for years. But even for me, it's becoming something that's not necessarily a bad thing about the show. For me, it's not necessarily taking me out of it, but it's become more noticeable. But yeah, going back to the contentious relationship between Mark and Cecil, from Mark's perspective, he was treated like a guinea pig. Cecil had him unconscious. He implants this chip in his head that activates the roar of the kaiju, and essentially he can't fly, he can't move, he can't function without Cecil's permission. And also working with Sinclair and Darkwing is a red line for Mark. And it's very personal. I think if anybody had experienced that, watching their friend almost die because of some lunatic, they would refuse to work with them in the future too. And then from Cecil's perspective, he's trying to keep the world safe. He sees potential in Darkwing and Sinclair and what he can do with the reanimate. So that if Mark were to go off the deep end and join Omni-Man or join the Viltrumites, that they would have a safeguard against that they would have a plan B. And just based on what we saw Omni-Man do, you can understand why when Cecil had the chance to implant this chip in Mark's brain, he took it. And people have made this point before, but Cecil very much is the Batman stand-in for this show. This is exactly what Batman would have done if he had the opportunity. And that fight between them, first of all, the way it begins in the White Room, was very scary. And by the end of episode 1, I thought it was Cecil who had the upper hand, and I was more nervous for Mark. And then by the end of episode 2, it completely flips because of the way that Mark grabs Cecil by the throat and threatens him. But watching Mark writhe in pain because of the noise of the kaiju, and then the device gets crushed, it just slows down time for everybody. It's seconds become minutes, minutes become hours because of how agonizing it is to watch Mark in pain. And eventually it is stopped. But it also convinces the other Guardians to turn their back on Cecil as well. Well, half of the Guardians. The team has now been split, where we have Kate, Immortal, Black Samson, Shapesmith staying behind. Monster Girl, Rex, Ray, Bulletproof, and Robot move on to form a new team. And also, Ray is still alive. Duplicate's still alive. I figured that they were still alive after that fight in Season 2 when they're going up against the Lizard Squad. Hack and PlayStation Network. So that seems to just be a funny bit that they do. Characters get beaten to a pulp. It's like they're one electrolyte away from death, but then Cecil and his team fix them right on up. So yeah, the point of contention this season so far has been Mark and Cecil and the differing ways they want to go about protecting the world. And I think what's interesting is we've seen the Cecil archetype so many times, most famously Amanda Waller in DC, Nick Fury in Marvel. And superheroes they're always talking so much shit about them. They're like, oh, they're corrupt, they're evil, they're just as bad as the bad guys, you can't trust them. And then they just do whatever they say. But in Invincible, no, they turn their back on Cecil. Even though I think a lot of people can understand where he's coming from. And they do a good job of helping us further understand by giving us that backstory episode, which was, not episode, but the beginning of episode 2, focusing on Cecil's past and how he got that scar. And you see why he's so absolute in his ideals. Typical cop who only has the job to live for. And you get a better idea of why he's so extreme in his methods. And I think for a lot of people it is obvious, with the threats out there, the giant monsters, and just the Viltrumites, why Cecil would go to some of these lengths. You also see how a young Cecil was similar to Mark and not wanting to work with villains who have been rehabilitated. And he doesn't hesitate. He kills them execution style when he figures out what's happening. And that is the pipeline that eventually leads him to leading the GDA. And the time skip between him getting there and seeing how unruly and inefficient the prison was, to where he essentially has become the warden of this prison as prisoner, literally being sent into the jungle and then being crowned king. It's just a perfect time skip to show the true skills of Cecil, that he is a master manager and manipulator. And his former boss tells him, his former mentor, we can either be the good guys or we can save the world. And then you can just use your own imagination, skipping from young Cecil to Cecil now, as to why he became so hardened in his stance that people do deserve a second chance. That he's not going to waste the potential of these villains, because the world is still such a dangerous place. And if they can do anything to help them win, he's going to take that chance. At the height of their confrontation, which was something I was waiting for, Cecil calls out Mark as a hypocrite, saying that he went off to help his father at the end of season 2, even though Omni-Man massacred hundreds of people, thousands of people before he left Earth. And that's the difference between Cecil and Mark, is that Cecil is doing this for the greater good, the bigger picture. For Mark, it's the same, but he's also doing it for his family. His family is always going to come before the mission. Mark is losing control here, but it's for good reason. It's not like with Omni-Man where he loses control because he's trying to prove a point. For Mark, it's about standing up for his friends. He almost lost them in season 2 because of what Sinclair did. So yeah, it is scary to see Mark act this way, where he's not holding back. He's absolutely demolishing the Reaniman. But from his perspective, it's for a good cause. It's a personal cause. It's outrage that's being inspired by someone he loves. So it's a lot easier for him to look the other way when it concerns his father, because that's his dad. He raised him as a normal kid. Obviously, he still really loves him. So that personal connection, that unconditional love, can go a long way, to where even though in your heart of hearts you believe that something is wrong, you're still going to give your loved one the benefit of the doubt. So it's always easy to pit two characters against each other when they're ideologically on total opposite sides of the spectrum. But for Mark and Cecil, that's not necessarily the case. I think that on both sides, there are differences that can very easily be understood. And you just want these two to work together, because like I said, Cecil he's such a badass. And I don't know what Walton Goggins is channeling for this performance, but I listen to it and I don't hear Walton Goggins. Like, I know it's Walton Goggins, but it's not. Because it's just not a character we really see him play. You know, when I think of WG, I think of Uncle Baby Billy on Righteous Gemstones. And just seeing some of the set photos from White Lotus, I know his character is going to be hilarious, you know? Such an underrated actor. But yeah, him as Cecil Stedman is just, he's channeling something that is very broken and sinister in nature, but righteous as well. And I just want to see the two of them working together. Like when Batman and Superman butt heads, but eventually they have to get over their differences and work towards the greater good. That's going to be a very satisfying moment when the two of them get on the same page permanently. Focusing now on Mark and his family, I think my biggest takeaway from these first 3 episodes is that I don't trust Oliver. To me, I'm not even going to say it because I don't want to get the channel flagged, but where I see him heading is not a good place. He is scary. They're doing this whole, he's an adolescent. All kids of that age are totally fearless. That's something Miyazaki talks about in his works. You know, in Porco Rosso, when the young girls are kidnapped, they're having the time of their lives because they have no sense of danger. So combine that with superpowers, with Viltrumite powers, essentially making him a nuclear weapon. Very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. And at first I was more scared for Oliver, that he was going to go out before he was ready and get himself severely injured and hurt, as it tends to happen in this show time and time again. Like when Mark first got his powers, he took a few ass beatings. So I thought that's what was going to happen to Oliver, and then there would be this immense regret from Mark and Debbie that they didn't protect him. By the end of episode 3, I was terrified of Oliver. And I don't know, maybe I'm looking too much into this, but it appeared as if Oliver was already slightly stronger than Mark, that Mark was struggling more with the Mahler brothers than Oliver was. Oliver doesn't break a sweat. His punches were landing harder. His movements were a bit more effortless. And the way he killed the Mahler brothers, who have been giving these characters hell for 3 seasons, you just can't kill. You can kill one, but you can't kill them both. He killed them both. And then he's just drenched in blood for the rest of the scene, and he's doing it with absolutely no remorse. That's what's so dangerous. He's like a little kid on the driveway burning ants with a magnifying glass, just relishing in his power. It reminded me a lot of Atreus in God of War, when he first discovers that he's a god and he becomes very arrogant and cocky and he feels that he doesn't have to respect people that aren't gods. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting from Oliver. So even though Debbie and Mark are making this effort to instill a morality in him, saying that, no matter how bad a person is or what they do, we don't kill. That's a red line that we never cross. I don't know if that's going to break through, because I think it's as simple as he's a kid, he's still very impressionable, and he clearly looks up to his dad, he worships his dad, he took the name Kid Omni-Man. That was the first red flag when he showed up in that suit. It was a fresh suit. I gotta give Art some credit there. But I don't know, man. Kids these days, they're on TikTok, they get radicalized by Andrew Tate. Please, Mark, make sure your brother's not watching any of those videos. I don't know, man. I'm just scared. But, from a storytelling standpoint, it's awesome because it just throws in a whole nother wrench. You have all these big picture things that you're worrying about, Omni-Man and the Viltrumites and a bunch of other shit like Battle Beast. Where the hell is he? Then you potentially have this little murder kid under the roof of Debbie Grayson. And poor Debbie, what an absolute trooper, right? She truly is my favorite character in the show. And she just does such a great job. Her presence really grounds the show to where these domestic issues, like trying to raise a kid, trying to, keep everything as normal as it could possibly be, even though your sons are growing up and they're trying to discover who they are in this world, and then heightening everything up to the level of superheroism. She's just such a warm and welcoming presence in this show, and just so relatable. It's a character that everybody can relate to. Everybody has been in that position of having to make those personal sacrifices for the people you love. It's not her son, but she slips into the role as mother without even hesitating, because Mark's her family. As she says, that makes Oliver family too. She's an absolute trooper. But now I'm scared for her. And I also don't trust Paul. He seems like a nice guy, but giving up the secret identities that easily.
I once sold a house to a famous rock star and never told a soul.
Oh yeah? Who?
Exactly.
You never know in this world. You never know who's working for what organization, or, he could be a fucking Viltrumite in disguise at this point. He could be Shapesmith. I don't know. It would really suck for him if he's just a normal good guy and he just wants Debbie to, be happy, and then Omni-Man shows back up. After all the shit she talked, like, oh, I don't need you to be Omni-Man. You're nice. You like to read. Nobody reads these days. It's such an attractive hobby. And then Omni-Man shows up and he's like, hey, remember me? She's like, fuck, man. Superpowers, super strength, super speed, incredible mustache. Sorry, Paul. Yeah, but so far the addition of Oliver has been the best part of season 3. And they said that he was going to plateau now once he reaches puberty. But if he is already stronger than Mark, how is Mark ever going to catch him? Mark spends all off-season training. In between 2 and 3, it looks like he's just been training. He's bench pressing the moon. And here comes this little shit, and he's already stronger than him. Like I said, maybe I'm just, I'm reading too much into it, but from my perspective, it looked like Oliver was the stronger superhero. And just the way he took out the Mahler brothers. So that's it, right? They're dead. It's always you kill one, and then the other one makes a clone, and says, oh, I'm the original, no, I'm the original, blah, blah, blah. It looks like that bit is over. No more Run the Jewels drops. So that sucks, because I do like Run the Jewels. But I don't think any show in the history of shows, or just anything in general, except when you're leaning back on your chair and you think you're gonna fall backwards, and that fear that sets in, that's how I permanently feel while watching this show. I've never been more aware of my own mortality, because you can be having a great time, characters are joking, oh, there's a mission, there's a bank robbery, it should be real easy peasy, we'll stop these guys from stealing the Declaration of Independence. Really funny that Mark doesn't know what that is because he dropped out of school. And then all of a sudden, here comes Kate's brother, Multi-Paul, and he's just beating the fucking crap out of Rex, to where you're thinking, oh my god, Rex is going to die. It's just chaos and blood and guts and absolute mayhem. at a drop of the hat. You just never know when it's coming. You never know when you're going to turn that corner and experience something horrifying. And usually it's all okay in the end because Cecil and his team are just so good at putting people back together, but holy shit. You just never know when it's coming. And every time you think that this show is going to slip into the familiar archetypes and stereotypes of superhero content, that Mark is Superman, he is invincible, he cannot be beaten, they pull the rug right from out under you. And every time, even though at this point, it used to catch me by surprise, but at this point, it's like I'm in fight or flight mode. My pupils are at their maximum pupilness, completely dilated. But not everything in Invincible is death and destruction, blood and guts. There's also love, like between Mark and Adam Eve. Finally, this is something that we've all been waiting for since the very first episode of Invincible. They're a couple. It's like we can all take a deep breath, like in NASA, when something goes good in NASA, everybody's going crazy. I'm the guy with the headset that sinks back into the chair, lights a cigarette. God, I need a cigarette. But also, I wanted to make a point about how Invincible uses the multiverse. We've seen it across not just superhero content, but just sci-fi in general. That's been the big obsession. And usually it's to really drive the narrative. And Invincible is doing that as well, because it looks like Angstrom is still alive, even though we thought Mark killed him, and he's stalking Mark and his family. Just another loose thread, or another loose match waiting to be lit. But they use the multiverse for these character moments as well, to further develop the characters and the prospect of them being in a relationship. And when Mark reveals that he spoke to Adam Eve of the future and she's still heartbroken by them never being a couple, and for Adam Eve, it changes her entire perspective on the idea of being in a relationship with Mark, because there's this alternate version out there that never got over Mark. So does that make her pathetic because she could never get over this teenage love? Or does it maybe suggest that Mark and Adam Eve are, for lack of a better phrase, soulmates? That they are destined to be together, and that when they aren't, things go terribly wrong. But it just opens up this can of worms, all these new ideas concerning the relationship between two characters. That isn't the driving force of the show, but is very important to them and to us because we like these characters. And as I just mentioned, we've been wanting them to be a couple for so long. So when Mark slips, you're like, come on, buddy, you should have just kept that in the back pocket. But they do end up getting together. But it's using the multiverse as an obstacle towards a relationship, towards love. And I think a lot of other shows and movies, they're using it to bring eyeballs to their content, but not in a way that's really developing their characters or making the characters better. Or serving the story, really. So, like I said, it's great that they're together. And going back to the themes of family, trying to build family, trying to protect your family, save your family, and for Adam Eve trying to rectify it. And, she's not the only character in the show trying to do that. But yeah, she goes back home. She makes this agreement with her parents. She's going to meet them halfway. And let me just say, in the English-Australian version of the word, Adam Eve's dad is such a cunt. Like, fix your face, motherfucker. This guy's always so grumpy. His daughter is over here basically saying, like, I'm going to give you the right to discriminate against me a little bit, even though you're a bigot, because I want to have a relationship with my parents. And it's always heartbreaking when children have to meet their parents halfway for conditional love. As we mentioned with Debbie and Mark, it's unconditional. For Adam Eve, it isn't. But it just speaks to her character that she's going to be the bigger person here because she still has things that she needs from her parents, that guidance, that protection, and having a home. And a small little detail about how she was able to build a treehouse because of her powers, but because she's not an architect, the structure is kind of falling apart. So she has to go back to school, she runs into Amber, and just another delightful moment, a nice respite from all the chaos. Two characters who were caught up in a love triangle still have a lot of love and appreciation for one another. A very mature friendship. And Amber has moved on as well. She's found a new partner, and it's two girls being able to catch up and gossip a little bit about their relationships. So it was a sweet moment. I'm not sure how much Omni-Man we're going to get this season. It seems like they're going to save him for a big moment. Just looking ahead at some of the titles, the title for episode 6 is All I Can Say Is I'm Sorry. So possibly a reunion between Omni-Man and Debbie. He does say at the end of season 2 he misses his wife, even though he called her a pet at the end of season 1. And when you say that, and you do the things that Omni-Man did, all you really can do is say you're sorry. Alan continues to be one of the most delightful characters in this show. Seth Rogen, an inherently funny guy with an iconic voice, and the back and forths between him and Omni-Man. It's like they have a little buddy sitcom brewing here, where Omni-Man says they're going to tear you apart and you're not going to be able to survive the laser, and Alan's absolutely ripped now, so has no impact on him whatsoever. And Omni-Man's kind of happy that he wasn't hurt. Alan is slowly chipping away, trying to break down that wall and not only reunite Omni-Man with his family, bring Omni-Man into the fight against the Viltrumites, because he's a fucking boss. At the end of the day, Nolan, he be giving these motherfuckers work. And I really hope we get to see Nolan versus Battle Beast in this season, because the shit you hear about Battle Beast, they talk about him like he's Wembenyama, or like Nas in 1991 before he dropped Illmatic. Like, yo, there's this dude who's showing up to Cyphers in Queens. Yo, he's nice, man. So I think that has the potential to be an all-time fight. And just a few more observations before we end this review. Love the new suit for Mark, even though the blue and the yellow is iconic. I do like the black and blue. I don't know many spoilers for this show. I really don't know any major ones, but I have heard that when Mark transitions to this suit is when shit really starts to pop off, which is crazy because we've already had so much happen. It looks like the narrative is going to evolve into a level of seriousness that we haven't yet seen. And as I said, the show has been not just comedic and action-packed. It has been very serious in the past. So who knows what that entails. I do like the new look. And just speaking of striking a new tone that we haven't seen yet, the opening for episode 3, dialogue-free, telling the story of what led this couple to a life of crime, and their story ends in tragedy. Very touching, showing us that it's not as simple as good guys and bad guys, but we see it in the real world all the time. That is it ethical to steal if you have nothing, if you have no other avenues to support yourself? And then the motif of the flower, and then the final petal falls. Out of nowhere, you get this really artsy and touching portrait of two villains, of two criminals in love. And the show has done this repeatedly, where we get these introductions to characters, we spend a brief time with them, and you find yourself incredibly moved by their story and what's happening to them. And the tragedy that's inflicted is gut-wrenching. And also Donald's character. We talked about how the Guardians turning their back on Cecil, not wanting to be used as pawns, to be experimented on, to be treated as expendable. Donald is the perfect cautionary tale, because when you compare him to what he was in season 1, cool, calm, collected, never overwhelmed by a moment, following Cecil's orders to a T, to now he's constantly in a panic. He's skittish, he's anxious, he doesn't really have a hold on things. So he's a perfect example of, the toll that it takes when you work with Cecil for a lifetime, or multiple lifetimes, because he just keeps being brought back to life. So he's become a character that just his very existence, his continued existence, is tragic. And the look of young Cecil, really funny to see him with the hair. It's always funny when they do that. Bald character, go back 20 years, full head of hair. Such a badass, too, the way that he doesn't hesitate to meet Omni-Man. He's just got great instincts. He knows that Omni-Man's a smokescreen. He's obviously here for some ulterior motive, but he knows that he's not in danger in this moment. And it's always those little moments. Someone not, like when Billy Butcher confronts Homelander, and Homelander really respects it, Yeah, Omni-Man's a god, but Cecil's a fucking psychopath. So he doesn't hesitate. One last point before we wrap this up. I find it so hilarious that Black Samson is always giving these big, inspiring speeches. He's so excited that the team is back together at the end of episode 1. And by the end of episode 2, they've already broken up. So, Black Samson, never dim your light for anybody. The perpetual optimist. Alright guys, that's where we're going to end this review. Make sure you comment down below and tell me what you thought about the first 3 episodes of Invincible Season 3. And you guys always do a good job of mentioning the things that we skipped over because, you know, we could be here all day talking about this show and all the funny, cool, and interesting things that happened and all the fun stuff that they most likely have in store for us. And we will be back next week for our review of Episode 4 of Invincible Season 3. So hey, I hope you're caught up. And for people who haven't watched since Season 1, hey, Season 2 is out in full. So go watch that, then watch the first episodes of Season 3. We'll see you soon.